two. It's a McAllister Monday. He got bumped for John Wildhack back a half hour.
He did.
Thank you for moving, Mike. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Well, thank you for sticking up for me in the open of the show. I appreciate it.
Did you listen to John Wildhack?
Yeah, I listened to parts of it, and then I had to help my wife with some schoolwork during other parts of it, so I missed parts of it.
What were our biggest failures, and why did you hate it?
Why did I hate it? You didn't demand that Red was fired, so there was a failure right there.
Yes, bad job by us. All right, let's talk football recruiting with you, and I guess let's start with this cornerback that committed last Tuesday. What can you tell us about this latest defensive back to commit?
You're talking Ibn Muhammad,
yes.
I believe, right. So kid from Camden absolutely looks the part, came up and visited for a camp, picked up an offer as a result of his performance during camp, and then quickly set up an official visit, and Syracuse was able to seal the deal during the official visit. So I think he's talented. I think he's got versatility. He can play a lot of positions in the secondary, but this is, another example of one, Fran hitting area he knows obviously very well, hometown of Camden, New Jersey, but also getting a firsthand look at players on campus during these camps, which shows the importance of these camps, and finding someone that didn't have any Power 4 offers until he came up and camped at Syracuse and earned one. So you can find guys that are like that. And Syracuse has had pretty good success in the past, not just under Fran Brown, but even previous coaching staffs, at finding players that come up to camp and earn their offer. One that I point to most often is Matthew Bergeron, who came out to a Syracuse camp. Syracuse coach didn't even know who he was, came up with a bunch of kids from Canada as part of a program, and he earned an offer, really impressed the Syracuse coaches, and obviously we know he's in the NFL now. So these camps are very valuable and very important, and he's another example of that.
Yeah, things turned out pretty well for Matthew Bergeron and for Syracuse, for that matter. Let's stay with defensive backs. CJ Hester. What are the chances that Syracuse lands him?
I mean, I think you got a shot. You never know in recruiting. Going into the official visits this month, Florida was considered the team to beat. But I do think teams like Syracuse, Georgia, and others have closed the gap a little bit. But it feels like it's probably going to be either Florida or Georgia. I think Syracuse would be a surprise, not like a shock, a significant, huge, massive upset or anything, but I think it's probably going to be one of those two schools. I would still lean towards Florida, but Georgia wouldn't be a surprise, and I know Syracuse is involved, and they made a big impression during his official visit, but I think those are the two that are probably standing out for him as of this moment.
There are reports out there about Calvin Russell, that he's had some great visits with big-name schools that are on him. Syracuse hasn't been mentioned in a whole lot of those. Is there reason to be concerned if you're an Orange fan, or is it just the case of, reporters are kind of picking out the truly the brand names and doing it for a little bit of clickbait?
I'm sure there's, some probably dismissal of Syracuse as a serious contender with Calvin Russell, because, again, if you look at the schools that are in his top 7 and you look historically, or at least the last 15, 20 years, absent last year and maybe 2018, then Syracuse hasn't been a school that you would think would warrant serious consideration from a 5-star level player. And so when you're going against the LSUs and the Michigans and those types of schools and blue bloods with deep pockets, I think most are going to kind of assume that that's where players are leaning. The one thing I'll say with Calvin Russell is if you look at the history of him and where he's visiting and interviews that he does and everything else, he keeps everything very close to the vest. So I don't think anyone really knows exactly what his thought process is right now, but we'll see on Saturday. The one thing I'll say is it seems like every school that he's visited has gotten some buzz immediately after that visit. I think LSU and Michigan, most notably. Michigan seemed to make up a lot of ground. I think a lot of people viewed Michigan going into that last visit as sort of an outsider in the group of his biggest contenders, and they seem to make a pretty big impression, and they have some buzz around them right now. But we'll find out more on Saturday, and then, in the event that he does pick a school other than Syracuse, I don't think that's going to prevent Syracuse from recruiting him the rest of the way up until signing day. And the positive about not getting him on campus is whether he picks Syracuse or picks another school. Go under the scenario where he picks another school. Because he hasn't taken an official to Syracuse yet, you can get him on campus late before signing day to try to change his mind.
Tight end Julius Miles expected to announce his commitment on the same day as Russell. What should we know about Miles?
He's kind of down to 3: Louisville, Syracuse, and Florida State. But going into his visit to Louisville, felt like the Cardinals were a slight favorite. And then after the visit, I kind of expected to start seeing crystal ball predictions and a lot of buzz around Louisville and those such things. And it was very, very quiet, kind of the opposite of what I expected to happen. I don't think anyone knows which way this one is going. I think it's really a 2-horse race between Louisville and Syracuse, but I know Syracuse is continuing to recruit him. Even though they got the tight end Carter Bashir from Philadelphia, they still want Julius Miles. He's been a priority target for them. They'd love to have a 2 tight end class with 2 guys that are as talented as those 2 are. So we're going to find out, but it seems to be a 2-horse race, and Louisville was considered a slight favorite going into his visit there, and we don't have any new information other than it just seems a little odd with how quiet that it's gotten. And then the other sort of interesting thing that got some Syracuse fans thinking a little bit was, I think it was a day or 2 after his Louisville visit, he posted a random video to his Instagram stories of himself on the Syracuse visit. Just kind of out of nowhere, no caption, just a random quick 5-second video of him with the jersey on and high-fiving some of the coaches. Just seems a little odd, so
yeah.
we'll see how that goes.
And you mentioned the fact that they just got a commitment from Bashir, the tight end. We see Fran Brown. He's gotten a lot of defensive backs to commit. He's on multiple tight ends. We've seen a number of offensive linemen commit to him. How do you find that proper balance, Mike, in a recruiting cycle from continuing to take the best players versus making sure that you have depth across the board, and that you're not stockpiling too much of one position, I guess?
Yeah, so they've got to have some sort of chart that says basically, hey, with the new house settlement, we have this many scholarships to distribute, and ideally, this is kind of the number we'd like to have at each position. And that is flexible to some extent. Like if you say, we want to have 11 receivers on the roster, and you've got 11 scholarships allocated, but a Calvin Russell type player or a Messiah Hampton type player is available, you don't say, well, we've already got 11, so we got to say no to him. You say, all right, well, if we bump it up to 12 because this guy's a special talent, then, perhaps we take one defensive back away or one from another position or something like that. So there's some flexibility built in there, but I have to imagine that everything from the coaching staff's perspective is charted and analyzed and all of that. And then part of the other way that you can make up for that is if you do have a little bit of an abundance allocated to one position in a certain year, the transfer portal can help balance that out a little bit the next year with, having a couple of players from that position group may decide they want to leave because of how many players are there, and then you don't replace them with that exact position because of the numbers. You perhaps replace them with other positions you think you're a little thin at.
Do you expect things to slow down, now that we're in a little bit of a dead period? A lot of players have committed right after their visits. Do you think things are going to start slowing down, or do you expect guys to, make some verbal commitments over the course of the next month or so?
I think over the next, week or two, you might see some. There were several players that I spoke with after they visited Syracuse who kind of targeted early to mid-July as a potential decision timeline. So it wouldn't surprise me if you started seeing that, not just commitments to Syracuse, but across the country. And then usually from about mid-July until about mid-August, you kind of have a little bit of a lull where it's almost mainly focused on future classes like 2027, 2028, new offers going out, things of that nature. And that's when you could start seeing some activity pick up from new offers going out, new players becoming priority targets, et cetera, but usually in future classes. And then 2026 will start to take a larger focus as the season goes along with players visiting for games, and then usually immediately after the season with who they target to try to get up on official visits before signing day.
Mike, anything else, either football or basketball related, that we didn't touch on?
Not really. I guess I'll put two names out there of, you mentioned who could be making decisions in the coming week or two. I'll put two names out there. Xavier Payne, the offensive lineman from Florida State, was committed to Florida State, decommitted, and it seemed to be Syracuse and Colorado were kind of the two schools that stood out immediately after that, but it's been very quiet for him. So does that mean that he's evaluating those options and could be deciding in the next couple of weeks, or does he want to take this thing into the fall and see what other schools get involved and kind of go from there? So we're kind of monitoring that situation. And another one that I said, when I mentioned earlier that some players I talked to after their Syracuse official visits had targeted, early July as a potential decision time frame. One of those was Walt Frazier, defensive lineman from Pennsylvania. He visited Kentucky after he visited Syracuse. Prior to Syracuse, he visited UConn. Seems like it's probably a Syracuse versus Kentucky battle, but if he is sticking to that early July time frame, then we could be hearing something in the near future about what his future plans are.
Mike, great stuff as always. Appreciate you coming on. Enjoy your week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Mike McAllister, publisher of Syracuse on 24/7. And with that, we'll take a timeout. 315-437-7644. Phone lines open the rest of the way. We've got today's business still to come. We are back after this on ESPN Radio.
Get cool stuff for what you were going to do anyway. Drink beer. With Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt, you can just snap a photo of your receipt and upload it to the website to